Good evening and welcome to the Westborough Advisory Finance Committee meeting of March 3rd, 2025. We're here in Memorial Hall and Town Hall. This is our 23rd meeting of fiscal 25. And I need to read this exciting announcement, so here we go. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body, as well as members of the public, may access this meeting in person or via virtual means. In-person attendance will be at the location in the posted agenda, and it is possible that all members of the public body may attend remotely, with in-person attendance consisting of members of the public. This meeting may be accessed remotely via the link in the posted agenda. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by in-person attendance or accessing the meeting remotely. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time via Verizon Channel 28, Charter Channel 192, or via Westborough TV's online platforms at westboroughTV.org and youtube.com/WestboroughTV. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed by Westborough TV, and we thank them for their kind assistance in doing that. So, being 7 o'clock, we'll get right off to our first guests of the evening, which is the Library Repair Project Team, the Library Building Committee. And I believe we're going to start with Kate Caraccio, the Director, and Ed Baldwin, Chair, but maybe we'll get some other people up here to join the excitement.
Hi, good evening. I'm really excited to be here tonight to talk to you guys about the Library Repair Project. If we've not met before, my name is Kate Caraccio. I am the Library Director. I've been the Director since August of 2024, so still fairly new in the position, but previously I had been in Wilmington as Director and Worcester as Deputy Director at their libraries. So happy to be here, excited to meet you all. Looking forward to this conversation. So I will get into it and introduce kind of everybody else who's here. We like to bring a full audience with us everywhere we go. So you're welcome for that. So obviously I've got Ed Baldwin with me. He's the chair of the Library Building Committee and also a library trustee. You'll see behind me we've got a couple of library trustees in the audience, also a lot of the members of the Library Building Committee. But more importantly, not that they're more important, but we're excited to have them here, is representatives from Vertex, our OPM, and LPA, our architectural firm. So they're all here to answer any questions that you guys have that Ed or I do not have the answers to. So with that, we'll kind of get into it. So we're here to talk about the Library Repair Project. And I think verbiage is very important when we're talking about this project. This is a repair project. So this is really looking at what systems need replacement or repair in our library. We have a very vibrant library. It's very busy comparatively, and I've worked at a few of them, so I can tell you that our library is very well used. You walk through there any time of day, you're gonna find the teen section full, you're gonna find all of the tables in the adult section, people sitting at, people doing tutoring. Our collection is really well used. So we are definitely a place that the community utilizes, needs, and wants. So we're really excited to be there, and I'm excited to be a part of it. So what does this repair consist of, and really where our focus is? And I do think that this is important, kind of breaking it down into 4 buckets. So we've got our kind of most important thing we're looking at, which is cost-efficient planning. The Library Building Committee and everybody involved in this project has been so focused on making sure that every decision we make is cost efficient, is going to be something that is the right material for the job, is going to be the least expensive material that's going to last a decent amount of time. And we have left no stones unturned, I will tell you, from sitting through all of our meetings and participating in all of our meetings. So that is very important to us. Now, kind of the biggest bucket, which is it's sort of a domino effect here, is our required code compliance work. So these are things that we have to do to make sure that our building is up to code. The other piece is replacing our obsolete and failing systems. These include HVAC, electrical, a whole bunch of things that are obsolete and failing. And I shared this in Select Board, but I'll share it with you too. I got roasted pretty hard first few days of my job because I could not figure out how to turn the light switch on in some of the offices because they are so old, I'd never seen them before. And it took me a good couple of presses to get it going well, you know, hey, this new director is something else, huh?
How many directors does it take to turn on the light?
A few, apparently. I got there, I figured it out, but we encounter new things every day. There are things, for example, fan coil units. I believe we have a total of 17 of these units. 3 have been replaced, 1 caught on fire. I believe 2 years ago, maybe less than 2 years ago, but it caught on fire, had to replace that. The one in my office is replaced. And there's one that flooded, a valve malfunctioned, and it flooded our entire, it's like a balcony area in front of the stairs and then down onto the ramp to Children's. So that was fun, coming to the library at 9 p.m. on a Friday, trying to figure out how to fix it or who to call when I am equipped with nothing but a library degree. So that was, I have learned a lot about repairing old buildings, but not enough to keep the girl afloat. So we are working as a team to keep her going. But that's why a big part of this process is replacing those obsolete and failing systems. We can't even find parts for most of it. We had a pump fail, of which we have 2. They both failed, leaving us with no heat. Luckily, our repair tech helped us out and MacGyvered 2 of them together to make one work. So we've got the one, and it's working for now. We do not currently have air conditioning, and we're really weighing whether or not that's something that we should repair or replace at this point, because it is an obsolete system. And we are being quoted something like $6,000 to get it up and running. So it's one of those pieces we have to look at. And then finally, addressing deferred maintenance, which I'll get into on the next slide. So brace yourselves and know I'm not going to go through this whole thing with you. You guys have been here longer than me. You are probably well aware of the pathway to get here. This was new to me, and this visual really helped me understand. One of the questions that I get a lot, is, why did you guys let the library get into such disrepair? Why weren't these things addressed years ago? And really, it's a nuanced answer, and it's this. This is why. So all of these issues we have known needed to be replaced or reworked or fixed since prior to 2012. In 2012, we really started the work to renovate and expand the library. And so most of it didn't make sense. Why would we replace the entire HVAC system? Why would we replace the plumbing if we were going to knock down the 1980 portion, build this giant add-on? It really isn't a good use of taxpayer money. And so most of the things that needed to get done were deferred, including, and this was interesting to me, 2 of the items on our list to be repaired or replaced had actually already been approved in 2014 by town meeting. And because we were going forward on this process, we actually didn't end up replacing the carpet or the windows, and never took the money out, basically gave it back, and said, right now, fiscally, it doesn't make sense to replace these windows if we're doing this project. Now, fast forward to 2022. Obviously, we know it took a long time. COVID put a pause on MBLC grants. We also were on a wait list for a long time. And so, you know, every single box there indicates 1 year past to end of life on all of these systems. And so 22, that vote fails, and we kind of figure out, how are we going to get these things fixed? So I understand it looks like we keep coming back. The library keeps coming back. Here we are back again. However, what we're coming back to you with are the same problems that we came to you with in 2012, but not the same project. So that's important, that this project is very different than the one that was in 2022. This one is focused on repair. And I think we've done a really good job making sure that that's where our focus is, so that we can get that library up to where it needs to be so it can function for years to come. So what are the essential repairs and replacement of these obsolete systems we talked about? So these are kind of the main ones, but they're important to talk about here. Roof replacement. Our current slate roof is from 1908. It is past end of life. It needs to be replaced. Our failing HVAC system, again, we talked about that already. We need to replace aged electrical and data systems. And then the window restoration and the lower level carpet. Again, those things were originally approved in 2014. So it's kind of like a domino effect when we go to make these repairs, because all of these things will trigger code compliance, which is not only the right thing to do, it's also state law. So, we replace the roof, triggers code compliance. And what are those codes that we're talking about? We're talking about ADA compliance for one. There's a whole slew of things that go with that. We need to add adequate restrooms, which means we need to actually add 3 restrooms. So we'll talk about where those are going to go in a second. We also, this one blew my mind, we need to install a fire suppression system. Install being the key word, because there currently is not one. We're not replacing or repairing one that is broken. There just is not one. So I will breathe a sigh of relief when we have a fire suppression system in a building full of books. That will make me happy. And then there's various building codes that we need to keep in mind: electrical, energy, plumbing, structural safety, and security. So that's the second one. Now, let me talk about the fun part for me, which is, where are we going to put those bathrooms? Because that's also a domino effect, right? We've got to find a place to put all of these things, knowing that our square footage is not going to change. We are staying within our own square footage. So we've got to kind of rearrange things to make the best use of every square inch that we have. So a couple of things to note here. This is the main floor, which some of you may call the second floor. It's the adult area. You'll see that's the main entrance. What we've done is those 2 front rooms, which have historically been for adult use. And as we listen to the community on what they wanted from us, which has been very important throughout this process, that we're presenting a project that the community wants, what we keep hearing is that people would like those spaces returned to be adult spaces. So what we've done is return those to adult spaces and move the teens over where the adult fiction is now, I believe, and so that we can wall it off and give them a little more privacy, but also create some sort of soundproofing so that our adults can enjoy their space as well. So that's a really exciting thing about this space. The other exciting thing, as you can see here, we've created kind of a hallway with the 3 bathrooms on this floor. We don't have any bathrooms on this floor currently. So to be able to have them here for adults to use, and for anybody using this space to use, will be great. Also will put us in code compliance. But one of the really cool things about putting them here with this hallway is it creates a small group meeting room right at the end of that hallway without having to do much. And that's super exciting for me in terms of library service. So with that small change, we are able to have a second group meeting room, because our current library of things, that little closet when you walk in, will also be a small group meeting room, a private study room. So we'll now have 2 private study rooms that people can use. Since COVID, and actually even now, we have so many people who do telehealth appointments or have meetings via Zoom or want a quiet place to study or talk on the phone with someone. And right now we don't have any small rooms. This gives us that opportunity with just some creative arranging. This is the first floor. This is the children's room. Just a couple things to note here. Where the current children's program room is, we've just expanded that into the offices, so now we have kind of a larger children's program room. The great thing about this is our children's programs are our most popular programs, and often people are having to be turned away just because the space doesn't allow for everybody to participate. This will give us more room, more people can participate. It's really a win-win. Also, we get to address the giant gaping hole in our meeting room ceiling. And I will share a story with you, which I did share at Selectmen, but I think about it a lot every time I'm in that meeting room space. I had met someone who runs a book club in town, and we had a conversation, and I said to her, "Hey, you run this book club. We would love to host you. Why don't you meet at the library? Like, we will set it up for you. This is great." And she kind of looked at me like, "Ugh, don't want to have to say this to you, Kate, but your meeting room is sad and we don't like to be there." And it broke my heart, but she was also kind of right. We do what we can with the space we have. We do all we can to make it a warm and inviting place, but it does need a lot of work. And so being able to address the ceiling in the space to make it more inviting and so that more groups will use it, I think is a really exciting opportunity. Not much to see here, but this is my favorite section, and it's not because it's mostly staff. It is because of that little tiny brown IT closet that we'll be building. You're probably well aware of our rat's nest of wiring that we have all through the library, through the ceiling, on the ceiling, above the ceiling. Mark does an amazing job from the town setting everything up, but I think if he has to set up one more phone line, we will not be his favorite people. But having an IT closet where all of the wires go into one place, where we have upgraded technology and wiring, will really make everybody's life a lot easier. Not to mention, Tracy, our adult services librarian, will be able to push her seat all the way back and not get stuck in wires. Finally, I did want to mention one of the things that I've been working with kind of our closest allies, our Westborough Friends of the Library and our Westborough Public Library Foundation. These are two organizations that work very closely with us to raise money for the library. Our friends run book sales every single month, and they do an excellent job. And our foundation, apologies, our foundation is committed to raising money to help fund this project. They've actually already started raising money. We had an amazing mini golf at the library event, which was a partnership between our foundation and our friend group. They were able to get sponsors for every hole. We had 168 folks come to our Friday night fundraising event, which was a ticketed event that cost money. And everyone had a great time, and it was just a wonderful event. Just the Friday night alone, we raised, I think, over $11,000 in profit. So there are things that we're doing now to raise money, really to try to offset the ask to the taxpayer. So they will be doing a lot more once we get a yes at town meeting. Very excited about. And I am going to hand it over to Ed Baldwin to talk about the financial portion of it.
Numbers.
Thank you. So I'm Ed Baldwin of 25 Mount Pleasant Street. As Kate said, I'm a library trustee and the chair of the building committee. I've been around the building committee for quite a while. A lot of you have seen me up here before. But for this repair project, we've been focusing very heavily on cost effectiveness. You know, the big lesson we took away from the defeat in 2022 was that it had been too expensive and too big. So we tried to scale it down to things that we need and that we can do without excessive costs. Renovations are expensive, but we've tried to hold that in control. So to do that, we're looking for cost effectiveness. We're considering the initial cost and the lifetime cost. We've made some trade-offs there. And we're all taxpayers, everyone on the building committee, and so we want to get the best value for our investment. I'm just going to skip over this. We've got a better slide coming up next. So this is the total project cost now. We had the schematic design phase in 2023 where we figure out what we're going to build and have an initial estimate of what it's going to cost. And we budgeted the town approved $360,000 for that, and we spent a little over $300,000. We have completed the final design at bid phase, or well, I guess on March 22nd that'll be completed. Town budgeted $1.1 million, and we spent about $900,000. So total to date is $1.5 million spent. We are well ahead of that in terms of budget. We are estimating $12,405,173 for the actual construction phase, assuming that the town meeting votes for it on the 22nd, for a total project cost of $13 million, or just about $14 million. I'll break that down a little bit. By far the largest chunk of let me take a step sideways. This compares what we had estimated in February of 2024 at the last town meeting vote to what we now believe the costs are going to be. The direct construction costs are what we pay the general contractor. And we'd estimated $9.6 million. We actually have firm bids now. They came in on February 19th, and this is a low bid. That's $8.3 million. So quite a considerable cost savings. I'll go into the reasons for that later. Professional administrative is about level at $1.4 million. The contingency, $1.2 million. The furniture, fixtures, and equipment, we're down about $940,000. Moving and temporary library fit out, we're still working on getting good estimates for those. Expect to get moving quotes, not quotes, but firm estimates later this week, and a better idea of the costing for the temporary library within the next week or so. We'll have both of those for town meeting. I am hoping for substantial reductions from where our current estimate is. But even without those reductions, this is a pretty solid, this cost is not going to go up. It may go down. As I said, we went from a total construction cost of 14.2 to about 12.4 million now. It's about a $1.8 million reduction. At that $12.4 million cost, the average cost impact per household is going to be about $120 per year. We have a number for 12.8 million from the town accountant. We haven't updated that to our most recent.
I can do that for you.
Okay, that would be
The
great.
official AFC 12.4 million, 5% interest forecast.
Okay,
$117 average per.
117.
per month.
I'm gonna take that as 120, approximately $120 is accurate.
It's close.
So,
It didn't. I mean, it changed a little.
yeah.
And it's $80 in the last year and $153 in the
Right.
first decrease. We always publish those.
Okay, great. I need to.
And I did ask John, and he said he used 5% for your numbers.
Great. Show me where that is sometime, because I do want to be able to update this on a running basis
I
without
can send
having to
you
go
the
back to John.
spreadsheet.
Great, thank you.
It's quite easy. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do it.
So one question that comes up a lot is what's different between the 2022 expansion project that failed and what we're asking now. And sort of the driver is the scope. In 2022, it was an expansion. We would have added about 10,000 square feet to the floor space. It's about a 50% increase from where we are now. This time, we're not changing the footprint at all. It's repairs plus the things that are driven by those repairs. So in 2022, the total cost would have been about 37 million, and now we're looking at about 14. The cost of the town, which is sort of the key number, would have been 28 million, and we're half that now at about 14 million. So we've gotten the cost savings in a couple of ways. Some of the big ones are we're using a temporary library in the community center space as our housing while we're out. All this is assuming, of course, that the vote passes in the 22nd. We got a variance for the front entrance that allows us to not put a handicap ramp there. That's almost $500,000. We've switched from a actual slate roof. Apparently slate, the red slate that's used on the library roof, there's one quarry in the U.S. that makes it, and their rocks are expensive. So we switched to artificial slate, which will last 50 years instead of 100 and some, and costs about half as much. There's a bunch of other changes, each of which I think are individually too small to go into, but they add up to another $200,000. So we, the building committee, will take credit for all those. We were looking really hard. It also, we're lucky in that construction costs have gone down throughout Massachusetts in the past few months, and that's another maybe 1.4 million. It's hard to tell how much of this is us versus how much of it is that change in the economic environment. But it adds up to almost 1.8 million. So this is the construction timeline. Assuming the town meeting votes in favor, we will plan to reopen. We'll stay in the permanent existing library for as long as we can. Then we'll make the move into the temporary library. We are targeting June 2nd for that, but that date is sort of vaporware at this point. We have to get the quotes back. And we have to know how long it'll take to fit that temporary space out to be ready for a library. Then approximately a year to 14 months of construction and refitting, putting the furniture in and so on. And then reopening in probably August or September of 2026 in the permanent location. So it'll be approximately 2 week closures, one when we move out and one when we move back. So, excuse me. So that's almost all I have. For more information, there will be a major detailed information session at the library on Wednesday the 12th. That's a week from tomorrow. A week from Wednesday. We have library building committee meetings every other Tuesday. The next one will be on the 11th. And the library has a website a web page for the repair project, which you can find on the library's website. And thank you. That's all I've got. And more than happy to take questions.
I know, Rod, you had sent some along. Do you want
me to go first or last?
We'll let Prashant go first.
So I'll start with a very
You don't have to go
simple
last.
question actually. So when I started researching about the library renovations around Massachusetts, one of the interesting thing I came across was that this year in January, Mass Board of Library Commissioners, MBLC, has actually granted like 1.3 million for 13 libraries for their renovations and constructions. Is that something, it's a tiny, probably a drop in the ocean, but then have we explored that as well?
We actually had a $9 million grant for the previous project that failed, 9.9 million.
Right.
And MBLC, to give you a grant, they require that you actually expand the library. You can't just do repairs and renovations.
Okay.
So, and that requirement is what drove the previous project to be so large. So we felt the town had said we don't want an expansion, and that ruled out the possibility of an MBLC grant. We hope to get grants from the Library Foundation. We are actively working with National Grid to get grants for the HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system. And there's other grants around, but they're not going to be on the order, not $9 million, not anywhere in that league.
Mm-hmm. So for renovations, there's absolutely no chance that they could give any kind of
I'll let
grants.
our library specialist say here.
Sure, thank you.
Hi. Short answer is no.
Okay.
Long answer is because of libraries like us, where it took so long to be on the wait list, the MBLC has done a lot of work to make the grants more accessible and easier to get to, so the wait lists are shorter. And the grant awards are sometimes smaller.
Mm-hmm.
They even have special awards for what we would call our rural libraries that serve less than 10,000 in Massachusetts. So those are usually what are getting those small amount. For us, we wouldn't be eligible for any of the ones through MBLC.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
Rod, you might as well start.
So let me start. I think you guys have done a great job, been very transparent, which is terrific, and come up with a solution that makes a lot of sense. The concern I have, and I shared it with Walter, I presume he may have shared it with you, is
Yes.
if I look at the non-construction related costs, it's almost $5.5 million. And if I go through the total budgets, it seems to me that there's items that we may or may not need to do, such as a traffic study. There's items such as a contingency, which started out at 10%, but now are more like 11.5%, over $1 million. I think it would just behoove the library to come back to town meeting, having scrubbed those costs and coming. I think you've done a great job of coming in with a good number for the construction. It's not as apparent to me that all the other numbers have been scrubbed as in such a detail, and I'm wondering if some of those items could be reduced.
I'll give you the quick response, and then I can ask our OPM representative to come up and give the detail, as much, probably more detail than I want to hear. But,
Not more than Ron. Ron loves this stuff.
So there are some things that are sort of left over from literally the schematic design phase, and we just haven't gone through and taken a close look at them yet. To be frank, we're so happy about the construction costs. It's like, yeah. But the fact that they're in there doesn't mean we intend to spend them. We're trying to spend, the ideal thing is we just get all the contingencies back to the town. So with that said, let me introduce Brian Fors from Vertex, our OPM.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Ed. And thank you, everyone, for having me. Brian Fors from Vertex Companies. We're the OPM on the project. And I did receive the questions that you had sent over. I appreciate that. And I think there's a lot of validity to those questions as well. As Ed mentioned it, a lot of those studies and things that we had talked about, in order for transparency, those are numbers that have actually already been appropriated from previous asks at town meeting. We had a traffic study. We had some acoustical design monies that we'd held from annual town meeting 2024 that I have translated over here, and the fully intend before town meeting here is to sit down with the entire project team and determine whether or not there is going to be any type of need for things like this. To discuss the contingency that we have right now, you are correct. We were carrying a 10%, which is something we'd recommend as a minimum for a repair project of this size. We're doing a renovation in Littleton currently right now, a little smaller than this project. And with a repair like this, you start opening up walls, you start seeing some things in existing conditions that really can add up quickly. And LPA, our designer of record, has done a great job doing destructive testing, making sure that the bid documents are tight. However, with a renovation, you really need to account for something like that. We did get favorable bids, very excited about that. However, it was our recommendation at the time to maintain the same contingency that we had from our estimate. So the lowest bid that we received, which was for around $8.3 million, including the alternate that we took, they were still $400,000 less than the second lowest bidder. I don't believe it'd be prudent for the town to slash the contingency and the construction contingency because we got such a low bid on this. I have full confidence in our bid documents that we were going to fight and minimize any change orders that are on here. But for the sake of our budgeting exercise, we did bump that up to the 11.5% that you referenced there. Trying to go through some of the other questions that I scribbled some notes down on here.
The amount actually stayed the same, but the percentage went up.
That's correct. So the number itself has held. The percentage of the construction has gone up 1.5% based on those numbers. I do believe you had another question regarding OPM costs and the duration of what we had here. Our fee proposals that we're ready to give to the building committee in order for review and approval is a function of time. And what we have in this project, it's a bit unique that we have a full operations that needs to be moved to a temporary operation. Per the bid documents, we have 11 weeks from town meeting in order to get Kate and her staff over to the Boston Commons location. We then, at that point, we would mobilize for construction, where we have 14 months. My staff, I would have a construction site manager once construction began, which is a full-time position on site, making sure that the contractor is adhering to plans and specs. At the conclusion of construction, our site manager is no longer needed, but we do budget from a monthly basis for management for closeout and warranty phases, as well as transitioning back from the temporary location to their new home. So that's when you referenced a 20-month, that's inclusive of leading up here to town meeting, mobilizing to get everything moved over, and then executing our contracts to actually get construction mobilized.
And then close.
Jump in. we will be getting a more detailed breakdown from Vertex. I'm not sure, pretty soon, I hope.
It's ready.
Okay.
Yes.
So once we get that, we can forward you a copy for
Thank you.
And I think just lastly, a couple of the active RFPs that we have out right now, which is going to be for construction testing, commissioning agents on this project, as well as moving, which is going to be a big service for us, moving Kate and her staff from one location to the other. The numbers that you see here do seem round, and perfectly even number is what we have. That's based on experience that we have with projects of this size. For example, a construction testing. You have a great point that we don't have much on here from a concrete perspective. We will have some condensing pads. We'll have some walkways that we'll need to engage with an inspector to come out and look at the reinforcement, as well as take the cylinders in order to make sure we have the correct strength in our concrete. We also will need to engage if there needs to be a blower door test on the exterior of the building. We also will need any type of structural review that's going to be dictated by our structural engineer of record. If there's anything that's in their statement of special inspections, we need to adhere by that in order to achieve their affidavit at the end of the project. We also, due to the alternate, we have incorporated a book drop into the project. There will be some structural members in that. There will be a new retaining wall, all of which will need to be inspected. So with a project that's a new construction, we usually would recommend carrying double this. We have pared that down to about half, and we do hope to do better than that number once we receive RFP responses. From a commissioning standpoint, these numbers are fairly common for what we have from a mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems that are all going to need to be commissioned at the end of the project, as well as oversight with the training with Kate and her staff to make sure that the systems can be operated correctly. From a building envelope perspective, we do have 50 there. I anticipate as we get to town meeting that would be pared down. We do like to keep that in case there's any type of infrared testing to ensure that we are properly insulated, as well as when we remove the roof, that the structural integrity and the integrity of the roof that we have there, if anything needs to be looked at or tested from a third-party expert, that we have the accommodations for that.
Thank you. Just for people who haven't seen it, they gave a very nice breakdown comparing February to their updated one. The construction numbers had changed. The moving numbers have been changed. You know, all to their credit, a lot of the other soft costs hadn't been changed yet. And that was why I really think, before I vote on it, I'd like to see those numbers scrubbed a little bit more.
May I just have one question for you too, sir? You did mention that the soft costs making up a certain percentage of what we had for hard costs. With currently here, we have $8.3 million as our hard cost, which is going to be the base construction with the ad alternate for the book drop. The remaining cost would be around 4.1 is what we have there, and that's including the contingencies that we have in there. If the contingencies are taken out as a separate line item, my numbers are roughly around that 35-36% range for the soft costs, in addition to what we had for that.
I think the difference might have been I was including the money that had been spent already. So it's about $5.5 million versus $8 million.
Understood. Thank you. Other questions? Go ahead.
So two things. One, in preparation for this conversation, one of the things that really struck me is the description of a lot of this work as like library renovations. And in fact, if we as a town want to keep this building, there's a chunk of what's being done here that is to keep this a workable building. Roofs, windows. With all due respect to the fact that it's a library, if we as a town want to maintain this asset, I think there's a story about a significant portion of this being about keeping a building feasible and usable for any function. And I think I haven't seen that. It sort of struck me as I was going through this. I haven't seen that messaged, but I think that there's a story there that makes the library specific renovations, that much more compelling as just a sub part of the story. And I do have a question that's not really related to that, but did you want to?
No, I just want to. We agree. We just you've sort of gone beyond you've gone out of our box. We think of it as a library all the time. But yeah, if the roof leaks and the heat doesn't work, it's kind of hard to use it as a building, as a populated building. So.
And I just say this knowing that we have to look at the whole town and the whole business, and when all is said and done, it is a building, it is a town asset that is being used as a library. One of the questions I had, and maybe you can go back to the presentation, There's the place where you mentioned the $1.4 million saving, and I just want to square some numbers there. The total of the numbers above it was 1.324 million. Not this one. There was one a couple of slides before this. And so,
let's see. I think maybe
it was what? Yeah,
This
there we
one.
go.
This
So
one,
the
yes.
total up above there is like 1.324-ish million, and then you also said there's another 200,000. So, but I see 1.4 million.
Right. The 1.4 is the difference between what we thought the construction bid would come in at and what it actually came in at.
Oh, okay.
So,
that's not
yeah,
supposed to be a
and,
sum
that's-
of everything above it.
Yeah, that's not clear. So it doesn't necessarily add up.
addition.
Okay.
That's because the bids came in lower.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And some of those other changes, has the value engineering effort been made already? So that's the result of that already?
That's
Okay,
correct.
thank you. And I did have one more, I'll
Go
wait
ahead.
for somebody else. My last question is, in years past, when we've done the research on this, somewhere between 1 and 9 and 1 and 13 assets that leaves the building for the library is based on people who've made a reservation, and then whether it was collected from other libraries or what have you, that people came and picked it up. And when I look at the large footprint of the stacks area, like that really addresses people who are coming there and they know what they want and they'll find it on the shelf, or for lack of a better term, like an impulse pickup. Somebody who walks in and says, "Oh, I wasn't thinking about this," and I grab that. But it seems that there's already in the space of the library, like a significant population of people who understand that I can order it and get it in X many days or X many hours. So have you thought about the possibility, and for those who are designing engineering, this is the Vertex team who probably works with other libraries as well. What is the opportunity of having, and this is such a loaded term, and I don't mean to use it, but like a satellite location that can keep inventory so that your space can be dedicated to small spaces for people who need them, and that the things you have in the building are the things that people are most likely to come and get, and that you're not keeping a lot of inventory on hand for just those impulse purchases and stuff like that.
I'm going to say one thing before Kate gives the definitive answer. We're cutting, 25-30% of our stack space? So we don't have as many books. We're using that space for the teen room and some other things. But
Okay.
I love this question. So yeah, this is a model that a lot more libraries are going to. One of the things we have to remember as public libraries is we're here to serve the communities and what they want and what they need. And so we do a lot of work on our collections. We are assessing data. We are data-driven people. We love data. We love a chart. We love a spreadsheet. And so we actually have people who are dedicated to studying our data, figuring out what items we keep, what items go, what new items we bring in because people are going to want them. We may buy multiple copies of a very popular book because we know for the next 6 months, 200 people are going to be looking for this title. Now, in a year, if that list goes down to 3 people wanting this item, we're okay with that because our point is to get books into people's hands, items into people's hands. So Ed's right. Because of that addition of the bathrooms, because the teen space moving, our stacks in our collection will shrink just a little bit. And so we will have to be very purposeful about what we keep on our shelves. And I think what's great in my favorite network, so Massachusetts is kind of chunked up into consortia. And CW Mars is the one that we are a part of. Now, CW Mars is my favorite one, having worked in almost all of the others. I love CW Mars for many reasons. The biggest reason is that it is the largest one. So it is basically Marlborough West, all of Massachusetts. So being a part of this group, which we pay to be a part of it, we are active members of it, gives us access to all of their collections. So when you order something, as you know, it may come in from Springfield, but it's coming in because you need it. So it really essentially expands all of our collections to be as big as Massachusetts. And that's just in the consortia. So beyond that, we have access to any library in Massachusetts. So we have all of these layers. So if we don't have what you want, we can get it from CW Mars. If CW Mars doesn't have it, we can get it from the state. If the state doesn't have it, we have another layer on top of that. in interlibrary loans. So it is really kind of that model. We just don't own the items. That would take some offsite storage. In some of the other libraries I worked at, I set up mobile vending machines for libraries, which were great. They were really heavily used when I worked in Worcester. I set those up at the YMCA and the senior center and the train station. So it's kind of that same thing, right? People who just want what they want access to the books. That's what we're about. So I love that you're thinking like that. And we are kind of already doing a model that fits that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I suppose in the interest, points for consortium, by the way, in the interest of coordinating with other libraries, there's 7 libraries in this town, and what do you do to coordinate with them?
School libraries?
That'd be the ones.
Yep.
I think the school
Heard of
students are
them.
also a big part of your.
You counting the little free library too?
No, not just the ones. I mean,
Walter.
because the kids are a big part of what you do as well. Like
They are.
What do we currently do?
Yep, so we actually do a lot. So we partner with the school libraries, our teen librarian and our adult service librarian and our children's librarians. They meet with them a lot. They have, I think they're invited to their meetings once a year and they go in. We do programs at preschools and at daycares, and we will bring books there. We also do delivery to, expanding beyond the schools. We do delivery to the Willows. We do delivery to a bunch of other senior living facilities in the area where we actually physically bring books there, and we put books on hold and we'll run book clubs. So we exist very much beyond our 4 walls, which is, I think, a necessity given our space and size. And our parking situation, which, if you haven't heard, I'm very excited about, that we have entered into a new agreement with the Congregational Church. So that parking lot is now available for library patrons. And so huge thanks to the Congregational Church for working with us on that.
Hi, Mary Johnston, 5 Sander Pond Road. I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees and a member of the Library Building Committee. Just something for everyone to be aware of. Yes, we do partner with the schools' libraries, but the collections of the schools' libraries are connected to their curriculums, approved by the superintendents and the principals, and we don't have say in if they were to decide one of the books isn't part of their collection anymore. So if we looked at them as a source to say, oh, they already cover this book, so therefore we don't need it, we don't know when they've gotten rid of that, and that impacts our collection, on top of which they have other constraints about their lending policies for how long students can have books out, and they're closed in the summer. So those books then wouldn't be accessed. So it's just another layer when we think about that there are 7 other libraries in this town, but they're not accessible year-round like we are. So.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. But I think one of the things you've heard that's happening is that there's a push on to try and reduce redundant services.
Yep.
And that's coming from a difficult place for every different group in this town. I'm happy to hear that the work is happening. And to the extent that there are leverageable savings to this town, I think there's a story to be had there if there's one that can be made. So thank you.
You're sure.
Other questions? All set? I get to ask questions every other week at meetings. I don't.
I think he can go. I have
Go
already
ahead.
asked.
So I have a question. Is it possible to see the breakdown of the 8.3 million? Is it possible to see the breakdown of the 8.3 million?
Do we have a breakdown on that, Brian?
A breakdown of the construction cost of the bid that we received. Yes and no. Not maybe to the detail that you're looking for. Once we execute a contract with them, we will require them to submit a schedule of values, which will have a breakdown by each division. What we do have right now is a breakdown of non-filed sub-bid costs and filed sub-bid costs. For a project such as this, any division that hits a certain level of monetary value, they need to go and apply as a filed sub-bidder or a filed sub-trade on this project. That includes your electrical, your plumbing, your mechanicals, all of which are bid prior to the general contractor. So we receive the filed sub-bids 2 weeks prior to the general contractor, and we post those for general contractors to use to include in their overall bid. So what we have is the bids of all the filed sub-bids, as well as the the lump sum for the additional cost for that. Once a contract is executed with them, then they would break everything out as a schedule of values that would be used in subsequent requisitions for payment.
But yeah, I think it's fair to say the cost estimate is done by but estimating each part of the construction project. But ultimately, you got a number from a firm.
That's correct.
Was a total, it was 8.3 million, and you don't know at this time exactly how much they think each little part is cost.
That's correct. The most detail that we have would be based on the estimate that we used a third-party estimator for. That's who provided the number that we used in our bid documents for an estimate of a number, which was we used about $9.5 million for construction. So we're very happy with the results on this. We do not have the full breakdown of what that general contractor's breakdown is at this point. It's not required to be included in their bid as that lump sum number.
Thank you.
So,
Brian, just one more thing. Have you checked references on the low bidder?
That's correct. Yes, we have. So the low bidder is Seaver Construction. We do have experience with them on another project that was done about a year ago. And LPA has also worked with them on a couple of previous projects as well. They are required to send their DCAM scorecard and update cards as part of their bid, and then we use that as to call out for references as well.
So you've gone beyond just looking at the scorecard.
That's correct.
The references. Thank you.
Yeah. Question.
So I had actually a question, a clarification as well as a question for you actually. One for you and one clarification, because in all full disclosure, I'm not a construction person, so for me it's a learning, and I'm just relying on the documents that were shared, or probably, I forget whether it was Walter who you shared those list of documents, or whether that were forwarded, or whether it was the library project website where I found it. So just to your point about the cost, while I was looking at the documents, one of the document that I found, and I was just trying to figure out like where the whole cost is coming from, like what are the items which are being which are part of the project, because I found like there are around 15-16 items. So I see that there are some 4 dimensions and there are some 16 items there, which I'll come to my question next, but just wanted to take one clarification. There is a PMNC Westborough 75% construction estimate. First of all, I just wanted to clarify, like, what is that document, and is that a good document to look at for seeing what kind of items are going to be included as part of this renovation project?
Yeah, so PMNC is the third-party estimator that provided the estimate and what we called 75% CDs, which is what we considered. It was farther along than that, but it's a milestone that we snap in the design period. So we consider the drawings to be 75% done. And on that PMNC cover page, you'll see a breakdown by square footage costs, as well as, because of the additional 25% that has yet to be completed, there's a design contingency on that top page as well. Okay. Ultimately, the thought is that that design contingency goes to 0 once the bid documents are completed and it goes out for bid for someone to bid on. But yes, that would be the level of detail that you would be able to extrapolate where we were coming from for the entire bid documents.
And as well as, could I also take a look at that as the scope as well, like what are the items which are being covered as part of the renovation? Okay, yeah, that was my clarification I wanted. Now, I guess the question in terms of this renovation, right, and going back to Rod's point about like some of the things can possibly be scrubbed. So while I was going through this document, I thought that possibly, I mean, as something for just everyone to is already probably aware that, we are going through a period where we are looking for the ways of saving the costs or deferring the costs so that, the town has less of tax burden. So I kind of looked at the whole of this PMNC document and in terms of what items are there, and I could find like around 14 to 16 items there. And I thought, okay, looking at this part about how we have beautifully, segregated by dimensions, like what is something which needs immediate addressing in terms of compliance, what is there which is in terms of the obsolete systems, or what is there in terms of, coming back from probably 2012 or 2014 as a deferred maintenance. I think what may be, and that would be something I would, suggest for the library board is, could we possibly go with kind of like a tier system, which is what is absolutely needed to be compliant, which I would think of it as a tier 1, which is what is absolutely needed to be compliant, what is something that has been obsolete system and absolutely needs to be there as part of, deferred maintenance, which has been going on for so long. And some of the items which possibly can go second year or third year, and can we do our borrowing in that terms as well, like one for the first year, second year, third year. Because some of the items that I see here, like for example, landscaping and side improvements like sidewalks, drainage, benches, trees, or a new book drop system. I'm in full disclosure, I'm not an expert, but just some of the thought process in terms of like going to the town with a full 12 million versus, okay, can we at least break it up that, okay, if less, then what would it be looking like if we have to be fully compliant? What would be something which is good, nice to have? What is something which can be like, okay, if we, if we go into some deferred maintenances, these are the items which will be included, because there is a lot. I can see that there is a lot of things which is interior renovations, furnishings, elevator modernization. I see some windows, paneling. So there is a lot of items there. I think there is a scope where we can tier them and see if we can reduce the cost at the first year. I'm not saying we should completely defer them or go with a reduced cost, but at least give an insight into, what immediately for compliance can look like.
Thank you. So my only response to that is anything that has to do with the construction itself, per Mass General Law, we would not be able to descope what the contractor has just bid on and what we'd be awarding a contract to. If there were things that we needed to take out, we would have to do that through a deduct change order to them in order to receive a credit back from them. As for anything that's going to be procured by the owner, which would be a lot of their furniture, your fixtures, equipment, your exterior furniture, those are things that are procured once we get an affirmative vote at town meeting. We begin the procurement process on that. We do have quotes for original basis of design, but we would start the procurement process on refining that scope and getting exactly what that was. Those purchases aren't usually made until later on in the project. We like to call it, if you tip the building upside down and shake it, those are usually the things that get provided by the owner. But as from a construction scope standpoint, that would be pretty locked in with the contract that we issue to this contractor at this point. We would not be able to take things out currently until we award the contract for the full amount, and then would have to back things out as a credit deduct at that point.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, think about the fact that if you're going to do the construction, you can't do that 3 years in a row. We're moving out so we can put in fire suppression, which means you're tearing the place apart. It's the time to do all this. It really would not, in this case, make sense to split this up into 4 little projects. While they'd be a lot more expensive anyway, probably cost you twice as much.
Well, the reality is there's so many of them that are going to be required once they meet the threshold, right? The ADA accessibility is going to have to be done. The fire suppression is going to have to be done. I think the reality is that this project has already been scaled down so much that there's probably not a lot they can pull out and still manage the compliance piece, right? Short of, as Kate was going through, right, like where we're adding bathrooms, we carved out a little extra room. I think that the drywall in that little extra room is probably not the place we want to start cutting corners.
Yeah, I think what Walter said, what you've said, Jane, is exactly it. When we started this project, we kind of had these tiers. Here's tier 1 of what we can do. It's kind of the minimum. Here's tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4. Did a lot of work on that, had a lot of votes, and we basically went with tier 1 with things like adding a little drywall so we can squeeze out a study room. So we really are kind of at our minimum of what we can do. The exterior furniture is probably because our lawn is going to get completely decimated by construction vehicles. So I would assume whatever we are ripping out or ruining, we're going to have to replace. So I completely understand you. There are things that sound like that. A lot of questions like, well, can't you reuse your old stacks? Well, I'm concerned they're not even going to make it to the temp space, to be fair, because they are so old. And then because we're reconfiguring the first floor to allow for those restrooms, they won't fit back in the space that we're taking them out of. So there's it's very much a domino effect. But yeah, completely hear you in a year like this to try to look at it that way, and just to assure you that we have looked at it from that perspective, kind of from day one when we decided to take this on as a repair and not a renovation.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anything else? If not, you'd like to make a motion?
McMahon, I move to recommend the town vote to approve the borrowing of $12,405,173 for the library building repair project.
Bradley, second.
Okay, any further discussion before we vote? Beth, I just want to make sure you didn't have any. You okay?
I think what you and Jane said towards the very end, this is a case of that we've seen with the school buildings where the repairs trigger necessary further repairs to be compliant, and we might as well do it. Like the breaking it in pieces, we're just going to keep triggering these extra costs. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'm in support.
Thank you.
So Walter, just to let you know what I'm thinking, as I said before I could vote on 12.4, I would like to see the soft numbers at least examined more carefully. So if we vote now, I will abstain, and then if there's a number that comes back later, then I'll vote to one way or the other.
Okay. Sounds good. Good to start.
I think from my side, hearing everything and all the questions getting answered, and the fact that there has been a due diligence done on figuring out what is the bare minimum, or at least what has to be absolutely be done, and listening to Beth as well as Jane and Walter. I think my vote will be a yes.
Is that a yes vote?
Yes.
Will be and is. Beth?
Blumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Blumberg, yes.
Brandt, yes.
Chimala, yes.
Clap, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Shafford abstain.
Okay. All right, we have 801. Means everybody's here. Okay, well, thank you very much, and I'm ashamed to say our next guest is going to lose her audience. They stacked the house here. Oh yeah, you guys are all staying for the planning presentation, aren't you?
One really quick question. When's your next meeting?
Our next meeting?
Yes.
Is Thursday the 6th.
Thursday. Okay. I think we'll meet
And then
on
Monday
the
the
building
3rd,
committee
and
will
then
meet on the
Thursday.
11th, and we'll get you the information after that meeting.
Yeah. So we're going to meet 3 more times before the booklet's done, which is Monday, Thursday. So Thursday, Monday, Thursday.
Okay, great.
However, we may
Thanks.
not have all 9 of us there at the time, so you may.
Only re-vote if there's a new number,
Yeah,
right?
or we could vote at town meeting, or whatever, if there's something. But appreciate it. Thank you all for coming and all the work. Jenny, sorry for the late hour.
Oh, that's okay. No worries.
We're excited to have you here.
I guess planning's not as exciting as the library, but
Well, it can be,
I'll try.
if you were planning a
Well, I
library.
think
How
they
long
brought
they
their
were
own audience. You have to rally your own audience because we
Yeah.
don't actually get an audience. They
Yes.
brought
I
those.
think the
True.
library
true.
building committee has about 10 people on it.
Yeah,
so.
I don't have as many fans, I guess. I don't know.
Do you know how long they were planning? They were planning a long.
They might have been planning for a lot longer. Yeah.
All right, if they don't
When you're ready. Okay.
take off. Everybody know Jenny Gingras? She's been here before.
Yep,
pretty
Jenny
sure.
Gingras,
Yeah.
Director of Planning. So I have 2 zoning articles and then 2 general articles
Which are
that I'm presenting
20.
to you.
23, 24, 25, and 26 for those keeping
Yes,
score.
correct. And we're just going to go in order.
Perfect.
And these are similar to what I presented to the planning board and select board. I have kind of modified them along the way because of comments I've received, but if you've watched those, it's generally the same thing. So first I'm going to talk about Article 23, which is for accessory dwelling units. So as you're most likely aware, in August of 24, the state passed legislation and signed into law changes to the Zoning Act, or Chapter 40A, which allows ADUs to be constructed by right in single-family zoning districts. This was added to the section of Mass General Law that also prohibits towns from imposing unreasonable regulations on religious uses and agricultural uses. So ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, are now essentially within that same category. This state legislation went into effect on February 2nd of this year, so it is currently in effect, and so anything that's in the legislature is already in place. And this is really just to update our bylaw to reflect those requirements.
Is that,
Yep.
so that's something that's expected of towns to do once a new law is passed?
Yes.
Otherwise, we're not in compliance with the law or something like that?
Correct.
Is that
Our current bylaw is out of compliance. I'll go over a couple of the things that we already do that is in compliance with the legislature, but we needed to update some things. And then also we had a couple of choices on what to do in certain circumstances. So quickly, I just wanted to go over the benefits of ADUs because I think it's important for the public to hear. For property owners, it's a low-cost housing option for adult children or other relatives. It also creates a long-term solution for seniors to be able to downsize while staying in their community, and then also offers rental income to help with maintenance and repair costs. For occupants, ADUs are a great fit for smaller households. They offer a way for longtime Westborough residents to stay in the neighborhoods that they love and are generally more affordable than single-family housing. So I have up here a great screenshot from the sitcom Happy Days, which you may be familiar with, but this is actually from the AARP website, which has a lot of great resources for property owners and occupants and municipalities on ADUs. So if you watched Happy Days, you'll remember that Fonzie rents an above-garage ADU from the Cunningham family after the family had concerns about their hardware store closing. Thankfully, it did not close, but that apartment provided them with that extra income. So I thought that was just a really cool reference because ADUs have been around for a really long time, and it was in Happy Days.
That was as planning board a description of Happy Days as I can imagine.
Well, I could do a Fonzie impression, but I don't know if I'd do it very well. I'll try better for town meeting. Okay. So the requirements. Currently in our bylaw, we allow up to 1,000 square feet, but we only allow for attached ADUs. We don't allow for detached. So the legislation that was passed, we have to require attached or detached. So you can see some examples up there of what that would look like. We also are keeping in line with what we were allowed for before, which was 1,000 square feet or half the gross floor area, whichever is smaller. That is keeping in line with what we allow now. The legislation actually has 900 square feet, so we bumped it up a little bit. We can't require any more than one parking space unless it's within half a mile from the commuter rail, and then we cannot require any additional parking spaces. The setbacks have to be the same as they are for a single-family structure. It can't be used as a short-term rental. That's one of those choices things I was referencing before, where they essentially gave us the ability to choose whether we want to have it used as a short-term rental or not. And the zoning working group decided that, and the planning board decided that we did not want them to be used as short-term rentals. We can't require owner occupancy for the ADU or the principal dwelling, and we can't impose any unreasonable restrictions.
Just ask a quick question. What is the definition of a short-term rental?
Less than 30 days. So like an Airbnb or I think the other one's VRBO, something like that. So ADUs have to go through a review process to ensure compliance with the local and state regulations. So a building permit would just be required to review the application for compliance. So instead of going through the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit, which we're no longer allowed to require, we would just go straight to the building permit stage, except currently in our bylaw, we allow for a larger ADU or reduced setbacks through a special permit from the ZBA, and we kept that allowance in. We mostly see that come in when it needs to comply or consider ADA compliance, maybe for wheelchair accessibility, things like that. So that's typically the reasoning that we see why someone would want a larger ADU than allowed. And I believe that's my last slide for that one. So do you want to handle questions
Yeah, let's
for
do
each?
them
Okay.
one at a time, because we won't remember them by the time we get to number 4. Speaking for myself anyway. Any questions? Group,
Sorry.
go ahead.
So, what determines whether it's an ADU versus a duplex?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's really the size of it that we're restricting it to the size. So if someone wanted to do a 2-family and limit one side to 1,000 square feet, I suppose they could. But then you also have the restriction that it can't be more than half the gross floor area or 1,000 square feet, whichever is smaller. So if you had 1,000 square foot home and half of that's 500 square feet, you would actually be limited to 500 square feet, not 1,000 square feet. So there's...
Can't do a perfect split.
I understand that. I was just,
Yeah, but the building codes would still apply very similarly, things like that.
okay.
And I assume by the building permits things, and then unlike maybe the Fonz was probably just living in with a ladder to get above the garage or something. These actually would have to be
Yes, updated with building code, fire code. They must
Egress,
maintain a
things like
separate
that.
entrance.
Yeah.
You couldn't walk through someone's house to get to it, things like that. Yeah.
And detached is allowed, so you could put it in your backyard, so to speak, if it.
Yep, similar to that first image I had. This is a picture of an actual ADU. This is not AI generated. So it could look like that, kind of like a small cottage, or you could put it in your garage, above the garage, your basement. There's lots of different options.
Neat thing. Any other questions?
So this may be obvious, but will this also impact the property tax that the owner pays? Does this mean if they add an ADU, that means they will have to pay an additional property tax on that new ADU as well?
I'm honestly not sure, but I would assume because it's an improvement to their property, it most likely would.
Yeah.
Yeah, you pay on your appraisal, right? So, and since you have a building permit, they know the new appraisal, so I think you would.
Yeah, I would assume
Not-
so.
Yeah, it's
And
not
would that
free,
also-
but it's. Beth, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry, my cat was blocking my getting to the computer. Yeah, one of the questions I have, I mean, I'm in favor of this in general. It seems like it's very logical. Do we have any idea of the impact on the schools? I mean, could somebody move in their housekeeper with small child into an ADU, and increase our school population?
Well, I mean, anybody, we can't restrict who lives there or whether they
Right.
have children. But I would just say to that, we currently allow them by right if they're attached, and we really don't see a huge influx of that. It
Okay.
would be similar to whatever we see for single-family homes.
Okay.
I just had one other follow-up. So previously, the DPW presentation that happened about the new water connections. So if we give a new water connection to this particular ADU, that would mean it would go under the new,
They'd be on the primary connection.
on the primary connection.
Yeah. It wouldn't be a new connection.
But they would have to pay
Well, if it's
more.
It
construction,
would likely be an additional bedroom, though.
Yeah.
If that part goes into effect, which they
Yeah,
haven't talked
if-
about yet.
Yeah, once I guess the fee part of it, the bylaw itself.
If it passes.
didn't
Yeah.
change that, but it is in the realm of possibility that, yes, by adding another.
Yeah, they would need to comply with the
What
requirements
he
for the
was
bedrooms.
saying in his thoughts anyway was if you've already paid for 4 bedrooms and you're at 3 and this makes 4, then in theory you wouldn't.
Right.
And in
That
fact,
all has to do with it.
yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't think that this particular change would change what would happen. So everything we're talking about is under the current rules and would apply under the new rules. So
Sure.
this is absolutely agnostic to that discussion. presumably.
True, but it was more curiosity, I think. Right.
Fair enough.
Yeah, yeah.
It
Which
kills
is fair. You don't often get to ask random questions to the town planners.
It's a long night.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Make a motion.
McMahon, I move to recommend the town vote to approve the zoning bylaw change as written in Article 23 of the warrant.
Bradley, second.
Any further discussion? Sean?
Ahuja, yes.
Lumberg, yes.
Bradley, hey.
It was good.
Grant, yes.
Not really, but thank you.
Yeah.
Is that a yes?
Clap, yes.
I just lost, but Josh, did you vote yes? I got distracted by the eye. Okay, Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Gafford, yes. All right, so that's 9-0-0. Okay, on to the next article.
Okay, and I'm sorry I don't have any fun sitcom references for this one. But if you think of any, let me know. So this is Article 24. It's revisions to sections 5.3, 5.4, and the table of uses. Sections 5.3 and 5.4 are about the dimensional standards and controls in the bylaw. So this article aims to fix inconsistencies in these sections and the table of uses, mostly pertaining to the M1 zoning district. It also removes an outdated rule which requires town meeting to approve the dimensional controls for new municipal projects in the M1 zoning district. Under Mass General Law, town meeting is responsible for approving budgets and reviewing bylaw changes, but the current bylaw gives it a role similar to the special permit granting authority, which the responsibility should lie with the planning board and the zoning the zoning board of appeals. The proposed changes will require that new municipal projects that are zoned M1 will go through a site plan review process with the planning board or zoning board, aligning them with other projects. The amendments also establish dimensional standards that reflect the requirements in the other areas of the bylaw, while also allowing for flexibility for municipal projects. Lastly, this article updates the table of uses to allow historically common municipal activities such as the sale of Christmas trees and indoor recreation. So for example, a lot of our school property or all of our school properties are zoned M1, and technically the sale of Christmas trees is prohibited under the table of uses. So this would now allow that.
All right, you got my vote. Lock them up.
Yeah. Under the current bylaw, this is the process. A new municipal project must go before town meeting multiple times, first for funding, then to establish dimensional controls, and possibly additional times depending on the project. The process also requires review by the planning board because it's technically a zoning article when it goes through as an M1, which involves other legal requirements. If town meeting approves the dimensional controls, the project must then return to the planning board for site plan review, and also goes before the select board for comment on the site plan review as required in our bylaw. It triggers other legal notices at that time as well. The entire process does take a lot of additional time and money, which we must budget for. Beyond that, if a project requires rezoning to become part of the M1 zoning district, which a property would, then that's even more public hearings and another town meeting vote. I also just want to highlight the administrative costs involved. So every public hearing requires multiple abutter notifications, so abutters within 300 feet of a project, legal notice, publications in the newspaper, which can be quite expensive, and then of course staff time. But while these steps are essential for transparency and due process, they do have those financial impacts. And then, so that's the process there. And then the proposed process, I just want to emphasize that this change does not remove the requirement for a project to go to town meeting for funding, of course, because that's the role of town meeting, and it remains appropriate. However, it does eliminate the need for town meeting approval to set dimensional controls, which, as I mentioned, under Mass General Law is not the appropriate venue for that decision. Projects will still go to the planning board for a site plan review, which includes abutter notifications within 300 feet of the parcel and a public hearing. The planning board will continue to have the authority to require larger setbacks than the zoning bylaw dictates based on public feedback and other considerations. And this ensures that the public outreach, notifications, and meeting requirements all remain in place, allowing anyone to participate in the hearing or submit questions. So essentially, the revised process makes it more efficient, saves time and money, and then still allows that public involvement, and I think overall is less confusing. One other thing going through the bylaw that is unique to the zoning district now is that it doesn't have set dimensional controls, because those were previously going through town meeting or the zoning board of appeals. So we did propose dimensional controls. Going back through 10 years of town meeting approvals, most of the approvals approved a 0-foot setback. There were only a couple instances where it was more than that, but in most cases it was 0. The height reflected in most of the approvals was also consistent with that of the adjacent uses. Therefore, we reflected that in the requirement. So if you're in a residential zone, you're limited to one story. But if you're within an area where it's like maybe surrounded by industrial uses, it would reflect whatever is required in the abutting zoning district. And that was it for my slides there. So I'll answer any questions.
Go ahead.
So, two questions. One, the first is the interpretation going into a lot of the town meetings was that any improvement on the site, even outside the building envelope, was under those regulations. Is this just regulating the dimensions to the footprint of the building, or if you have an HVAC unit or a transformer or something like that, is it regulating that as well? I think that's the lot of the reason why at previous town meetings where they set the dimensional requirements, they made it 0. I think this actually comes from Hastings or somewhere where there was a mechanical piece of equipment that people objected to or something like that.
Yes. So that's a good question. We had talked about this, I believe, last town meeting or the town meeting before, when something came before town meeting. And after talking with town council, the interpretation would be that the setbacks apply to the structure, as is the case with any structure in any zoning district in town. So it's not the area where the construction would occur. But typically when something goes through the planning board, they do want to know where the construction staging areas will be, things like that. So that would be captured in a site plan.
But that's not those wouldn't be a dimensional requirement.
No.
So my only other thought on this was that apropos of the maximum number of stories, wouldn't it make sense to have the setbacks be the same as the whatever zoning area they were adjacent to? I mean, that would be my one objection to the way this is written right now. Instead of having 5 feet, if you're in a zone that requires 10 feet, it should be 10 feet.
Yes, and we did think about that, and then looking at the zero setbacks, which went back. I went all the way back to 2014, I believe, or that was the case. But the thought was that we wanted that flexibility really for projects that had to do with like water treatment or things that needed to access to maybe where there's an existing drainage easement. And then 5 feet is the requirement of how close a structure can be to a lot line under the fire code to be safe. So you cannot be less than 5 feet from another structure, essentially.
I thought it was actually 10 feet,
Unless they changed it, I believe it's 5 feet.
If you each have 5 feet, maybe you're 10
Yeah.
feet.
So that was the thought, just to allow that flexibility. And then when it goes to planning board, often what they do is if they feel like that is too close to the lot line because of other factors in the area, then they'll ask it to be moved further away. But there typically, has to be a reason for that. Like I said, there could be an existing drainage pipe or sewer line or something like that where the project would need that flexibility.
Thank you.
So I had a question on the height. Isn't most residential, people build 2-story houses, 3?
Yes.
So where's the one come from?
Yeah, you're correct. But looking at the feedback from past town meetings, if it's within a residential district, it seemed like people felt more comfortable with the 1 story. But typically what you'll see is like a water treatment building, something like that.
Station.
Yeah, that would be limited to 1 story. Yeah.
2 questions. One on the height. Like a warehouse space can be 30 feet tall as 1 story. Is that 1 story?
That's a good question. So it would be in line with the height that's in the surrounding area. So for if it was in the industrial zone, it would just reflect that height that's in the industrial zoning district.
But that regardless of the number of floors then?
Yes, so it would reflect what is within that abutting zoning district.
Okay, thank you. And my other question was, one of the other changes you made was for indoor recreation, went from no to yes.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the tree selling?
No, you can't play basketball in the gym apparently.
So I guess, I was wondering if this is like back to, because the senior center has had recreation indoor for a long time, and that's M1, isn't it?
I believe the senior center is, and the community center is not. So if we ever wanted, it's in the downtown planning overlay district, and it went through the planning board process for a special permit. But if we ever wanted to rezone that to M1, technically indoor recreation would not be allowed as a principal use.
Okay. M1 was town owned.
Yes.
Isn't it? So how can we both own the building and it's not M1? Just because of the zone it's in?
Yes, so it doesn't automatically rezone. You have to go to town meeting to rezone a building, which we may not want to in all cases. For example, the Affordable Housing Trust owns some buildings that they want to redevelop for affordable housing. Yeah. And so we wouldn't want to rezone it as M1 because in M1, you're not allowed to have any residential uses.
Thank you.
Is there a difference between M and M1? I saw both listed in the chart, but I didn't know.
Yeah, I went back in the bylaws to try to figure out when that was changed, but M is for like state-owned land or federal-owned land, and M1 is for municipal.
Like the court would be M.
The court?
If people really want to know about the history of M1, I can enlighten you sometimes. It actually goes back to the original 1980 library edition where I recall Dick Wood, who was a longtime lawyer in town and longtime library trustee, as the library, and I was a library trustee at the time too, as the town was considering how it would zone in order to accommodate what the building footprint of the 1980 library edition was. I'd have to go back and dig through my notes or whatever, but it was decided that the path of least resistance would be to get the town to rezone the library lot as M1, let the town meeting set the building dimensions, and then that would allow the library addition to be sized and scoped to fit on that lot. And that was the beginning of the new M1 district.
Yep, correct, of course. I believe the bylaw was 1976 when it changed, so that timing makes sense.
Yeah, 1980 edition.
Other questions?
Can you just go back a couple slides to the process as it currently stands right here?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I can appreciate a lot of what's in here, and I agree with a lot of what's proposed to be changed. But I'm wondering, can you give me a hypothetical as to where it would come back to town meeting for the dimensions? Because I'm thinking if we're at the point where we're funding a building, we have plans from the prior use case that we already spent $1 million to plan it, to poll the community and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't we have plans at that point that the town would be able to vote on, right?
I would think so. And this is the current process for new buildings. For existing buildings, the process was changed in 2019 to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals instead of through town meeting. But you're right. I mean, that should be in place before we spend extra funding. The DPW, for example, which is what I've seen, they'll go to town meeting first, and they'll set the dimensional controls, and then they'll design it. They usually have a concept plan in hand just to show town meeting, but they would typically have that go to town meeting before funding it, or maybe on the same warrant.
So this would allow existing structures to be modified outside of town meeting, like.
They already are. That was changed in 2019.
So we're really just talking about loosening the ability to change these setbacks or dimensional requirements after funding,
so this
outside
is,
of town meeting.
This is for new structures. So it would go through town meeting for funding, and then under the new process, it would go town meeting for funding, and then it would go to the planning board for a site plan review, like projects typically do. So you would still go through that process for that.
So I guess the tricky part is you'd have to vote for the funding before you knew.
And
Before it went
that's
to that
troubling to
review.
me. Yeah.
But at least there are public hearings at those meetings, I guess. But yeah,
I mean,
trickier.
these are large scale projects usually, and
But yeah, well, it'd have
I would
to be
want to
if it's
know
new
what the
construction nowadays,
yeah.
Right. You still have the.
No, but this would now, I wouldn't say encourage, but I would anticipate seeing more requests for funding without the plans in hand.
It seems like it's putting a lot more authority in the select board and the planning board than in town meeting.
Correct.
On dimensions.
On the
Right.
project.
No, just really the dimensions. I think.
Yeah, it's really the dimensions. What has happened that town meeting turns into the special permit granting authority. So people aren't voting on the dimensions; they're voting on the use, where that's more appropriate at the funding stage, where they're voting on the use. Also, it has to go to town meeting to become an M1 zone, so it goes there at that time as well. And then I would say typically for funding, you would have something in hand on where the project is going.
And my only point would be is that it operates now as a forcing function to get it before town meeting, whereas there exists the opportunity now that, to your point, they wouldn't have to come back.
Right, they would go to town meeting for funding and for the rezoning.
I would prefer it all happen before the funding. So that's...
But the funding's first in this plan.
As is usual. I mean, that it always comes because you have to have the money, right, to design the project.
If though we already have the plans in hand,
Mm-hmm.
then it could be voted on while the funding is going through as well.
Yes, and typically I would say that you would have the plans on where the structure is going, or at least a concept plan, and then the details can be worked out in the site plan process.
I guess what I'm used to thinking about is we bring a project forward and ask for design money. Then the design comes back and town meeting then approves the design. And something seems missing in this new plan.
So you would still need funding for construction, for design and construction. So it would go to town meeting as appropriate for those two different instances for funding. But for the actual
funds at the beginning, and but before the design is done, people are supposed to approve the construction.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
This new plan looks to me like people are supposed to approve the design and construction without actually having the design done.
No, I wouldn't. No. I mean, when something comes to town meeting for construction costs, typically there's a presentation with the proposed plan for construction, because you wouldn't know how much the construction costs until you have a plan,
right,
a design plan. So town meeting is voting on that usage of the funds for that purpose. But what's happening now is that town meeting's voting on the dimensions, which is not something that's done by really any other town, and should fall with the planning board or zoning board of appeals as it does for every other project.
Yeah, I think to clarify that your top thing where it says town meeting for funding can actually be a 2 different town meetings process of coming once for design money, coming back with a design, and then asking for construction money, and then this happens. But I would think if you came back with your design, you should specify on that design where the building's going,
which is
what
where
the
I'm getting
setbacks are going to be.
Which is where I'm getting hung up here, is I'm trying to figure out what the hypothetical is, where we fund the design goes back for full funding, construction funding in box 1 there. How would we end up in this second town meeting for dimensions if we've already voted on the design?
Currently, it's required in the bylaw that
to go back
to town meeting and set the dimensions. So instead of what I'm proposing is that it be set to 5 feet, town meeting now has to decide, do we want 5 feet? Do we want 10 feet?
But wouldn't that already be present in the design paperwork?
But town meeting has to approve it.
Oh, I understand that, but it could still happen right there at the town funding meeting.
Yes, that would still, that would still happen at the funding. So the dimensional controls is kind of duplicating the process.
Yeah, I think typically in the past, there would be the article to pay for the funding and immediately after the one for the dimensions. And if the funding didn't pass, then you wouldn't bother doing the dimensions.
Right.
But so there exists the possibility that it would be approved for funding and then the town would change the dimensions?
Technically at town meeting, the funding could be approved and then the dimensions not be approved. So then it would fail.
Yeah, kind of bizarre.
And they would have to go back and redesign and come back again.
Funding probably requires 2/3 and the dimensions majority.
No, dimensions are 2/3.
Also, yeah. Okay.
And one of the other kickers with that is that zoning articles, if it fails, it can't come back for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also just something to consider.
So yeah, I think it makes sense maybe to push the dimensions into a public hearing and with people who are more experts, and then the people who say live by it and are upset by it can go there perhaps and present their case as well as they can at town meeting.
Yeah, I think it's a less confusing, more focused process because, someone might think, oh, I already went to town meeting for this. And there's, 34 items on the warrant. Whereas here, a site plan review is more specific. It might be one of 3 things on the planning board agenda. And they're really getting into what they want to see what they're hearing from abutters, where they can't really do that right now because it's set at town meeting. And so they can't have that flexibility.
I think what changes in this that we haven't had before is that it is possible for us to have approved something, the plans at town meeting, and that there could be a change before it gets to the site plan reviews. There could be a change in something in the decision making that may not change the actual functional use or the cost, but may impact envelope, and that can now be done without having to come back to town hall.
Correct. I mean, the thing I like about it being done as more of a site plan review thing is that it's complete focus on that topic by the people who are really interested in it, namely abutters. Whereas at town meeting, it's part of a long day, and the interest level of most people attending is not near that of if you live next door to it, I think. So, yeah. Anyway. Sounds like it's a more standard way to do it too, right? I mean, state-wise.
I think I'm hung up on the slide where it says town meeting approves design, like, can you go back to that one? Town meeting for funding. I think we need a line in there that's town meeting for design, town meeting for funding, whether they happen at the same town meeting or not. I think those are two separate items and two steps in the process. And if they're not, because, how do I say this right? I don't want to approve construction without knowing the cost. So to me, this current process is missing something.
But DPW currently tries to bundle the two of them together, and I think that was one of Rod's observations, is that what you're talking about is very consistent for schools, for town municipal buildings, but DPW, not that they're doing it their own way, they just, because of timing and the way they get their expertise involved, it's one step process. So maybe the meeting for funding could say, I don't know, maybe there could be a little more language, but this says it all. It's just, it's not wrong. It's just not detailed, but it's a friggin' slide. It's a
slide
PowerPoint.
Yeah. I can clarify a little more and say for design and construction, and that may or may not be on the same.
Right. Because obviously we don't want things coming to town meeting and having people vote before they know the cost.
But that's not going to happen because of this slide.
No, but that's the implication. I mean, I actually got texts from people, being very concerned about that town meeting could approve something without knowing the cost, the way it's being presented. I'm not saying the way it'll happen, but that's a concern I'm seeing.
I find it really hard to believe town meeting would approve construction without a cost estimate.
You don't know her friends.
I guess. Anyway.
Yeah. I'm happy to clarify that a little more for town meeting.
Apparently it'll be a question, so that sounds like that's good feedback. Right.
And I had one other piece of information. I heard Jen say, I believe that she said if it's rejected by voters, it couldn't be brought back for 2 years. I'm looking at town meeting time, 3rd edition right now. And my interpretation of this sentence that says, in a town that has accepted Section 8 of Massachusetts Zoning Enabling Act, no proposal to amend the zoning bylaw which has been unfavorably acted upon by town meeting may be considered again for 2 years unless recommended by the planning board. So my thought on that, and the way I've thought, though I can do more research, is that if a citizen brings a zoning bylaw that's defeated, they can't bring it back for 2 years. But that if the planning board wants to bring a zoning bylaw back in less than 2 years, as long as they are voting and recommending it, then it can be brought back sooner than 2 years. That's my interpretation of what I've read.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, now let's.
McMahon, I move to recommend the town vote to amend the Westborough zoning bylaws as written in Article 24 of the warrant.
Bradley, second.
Any further discussion?
I'm going to vote no, just because my objection is to having the dimensional requirements not match the adjacent zoning areas. But in principle, I agree, town meeting doesn't need to be the one that sets these parameters.
I would like to ask a little bit more clarification on the municipal uses. You said that right now Christmas tree sales can't be on town property, and this is going to change that? And that, what were the other things that are going to be changed?
Just indoor recreation. So
Okay.
yeah, and I'm happy to share the use table with this committee,
Okay,
but most
I-
things are not allowed in the M1 zoning district.
Okay, I'm going to vote against this simply because of the Christmas tree sales.
Why is that?
That concerns me. Because it concerns me. It's a separation of church and state.
Okay, I get it. Discuss it, but we're already doing it at,
I'll just say it's an existing line item on the use table. So I should clarify, it's not an added use, it's an existing use on the use table, but it's just not allowed in that district.
Okay, that doesn't make any sense to me. Can you clarify what you're saying?
Sure. And can I bring up the use table? Oh,
Yes, please.
yeah.
Did you have to
So-
make sure you closed everything before you came to show us in case you had to bring? That would make me so anxious.
Yeah. Well, I'm a planner, so I usually have it prepared. So this is the use regulation schedule. So just a little background for zoning. So this is available on our website, and this is how we know when someone calls us if something is allowed in a zoning district. So I'll just use a quick example, like R is a residential zoning district. So if you look here, single-family dwellings are allowed by yes. In the BA district, which is the highway business zoning district along Route 9, a single-family dwelling would require a special permit, and that's why that says SP. And then what I'll really focus on is M1 that has an N. That means that single-family dwellings or single-family homes are not allowed. So you would not be allowed to have that in that zoning district. So you can see here that on the use table, we have all of these things. Most things are not allowed in the M1. So there's no residential use allowed. If I go down to the next, open uses, and these uses have been around for decades. They just didn't change. So you'll see a couple of kind of odd ones on here, like the animals raised for pelts. So that's not allowed. Recreational camps are a yes in the M1. A cemetery is a yes. We do not allow drive-in theaters. And then
concert on the green today. Anymore.
And then, so here, you have outdoor recreation is a yes. And then here, so this exists. This actually has been on the use table for quite some time. I can only guess the history of it. It was probably because of heavy traffic volume that they wanted to be able to regulate the use during, of course, the time when Christmas is celebrated. But in the M1 district, it's not allowed. However, traditionally...
I'd like it to stay not allowed.
Okay. And then, I don't know if I need to go through the rest, but you can see that most things are not allowed in that zoning district, except for things that are protected use under Mass General Law. So, any other questions on that?
No questions on that for me. I'm just very supportive of selling Christmas trees on school property. Civic Club donates.
I'll change my mind.
Upward of $50,000 a year this year went back into our community by doing that. And I don't consider a Christmas tree a religious symbol. It's a decoration, not a particular religious symbol. Anyway. I think we're ready to vote.
Yep.
Prashant?
Ahuja, yes.
Lumberg, no.
Bradley, yes?
Brandt, no.
Clap, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Shafford, no.
Okay, 6-3-0. With 3 no's. I caught. Okay, so I got from Beth Christmas trees. I got from Rod dimensions not matching the neighborhood. And do you have something different?
No,
No, I meant. Do you have any?
I don't see the need to pull it back. If we have plans from a previous funding of the design, these should be able to be approved at the same time the construction plans are approved. And if there's not, then that's a viable concern of the community that I think should be taken into account. I don't want to see it taken out of the hands of the constituents.
Okay. Let's move on to Article 25.
Okay, so Article 25 is the acceptance of a parcel with the address of 190 to 212 Oak Street. So it's at the corner of Oak Street and Milk Street next to the courthouse. You can see on the map here, I know it's small and I'm sorry. The courthouse is the bottom right. And so the planning board approved a special permit for a development known as Village Commons on Gleason Street. And part of that bylaw requires that if a developer wants more density for a development, then they need to exchange a sending parcel. So they have to donate a piece of land to the town. And that's what this is. The developer had originally actually proposed a housing development on here, but the planning board asked for it to be donated to the town instead for additional density on the existing multifamily parcel. So it needs to go through town meeting for acceptance of the deed before the developer can proceed. And one question that did come up with the select board was, my mouse is not showing up here, I'm sorry. I was trying to point to it, but the driveway for the courthouse, the question was, does that have an easement? And the answer is yes. So there's an existing easement for that driveway to cross the property to get to the courthouse.
And would this become M zoning or unrelated to this? It's still zoned what it is and we just own it for now,
We would need to rezone it as M1
if we wanted to.
if we wanted to, yeah.
Do we have any ideas of plans for this space other than, I mean, making it easier to get on and off Route 9, or is it putting
I
something
thought the
there
purpose
someday?
was open space.
Yep.
That when you,
Sorry. Do you want me
I
to-
thought that the original intent of the sending parcel was to give us open space to compensate for the lack of open space elsewhere.
Correct. The guidelines in the bylaw and the planning board, this would be used as open space. It could potentially be used as recreation, so maybe like a park or something like that, but the purpose is to keep it as open space and undeveloped land.
Yeah, as long as we don't have to groom it, I guess. Any questions? Adam?
Just one, what is the definition of sending parcel?
So it's a parcel that's donated or gifted to the town. That's just the term that they gave it in the bylaw. I'm not sure why, but it's essentially a piece of land gifted to the town.
Thank you.
Isn't the Freedom Memorial Park, the Veterans Park, essentially with that?
Can you use the microphone, please?
I think the Veterans Freedom Park, it was something similar. There was more density over by the train station or something, and
Yeah,
that
maybe
land
for
got granted.
Park Westborough, that might have been the case. I believe that they got more density on that parcel in exchange for that.
McMahon, I move.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, given our town has got a lot of litigations that it is dealing right now, do you see any future financial burdens or cost or any kind of obligations that may come up with this parcel of land with this particular article?
No, I don't. I mean, the plan for now is to keep it as is. I have not heard or anticipate any other plans at this time, so no.
Anything else? All right. McMahon, I move to recommend the town vote to authorize the select board to acquire by gift the properties at 190 to 212 Oak Street.
Bradley, second. Sorry. I was about to go, yay. That doesn't make sense.
Anything else? If not,
Vote.
Ahuja, yes.
Lumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brant, yes.
Clap, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Shafford, yes.
All right, so that's 900, and onto the sidewalk easement.
Okay,
Well, not literally,
Last one.
not built yet.
Not built yet. So this is for a sidewalk easement for 2 Bridle Lane. So part of the planning board regulations require that the planning board ask for some sort of pedestrian connection, or that the applicant construct a sidewalk or provide an easement, things like that. So this was agreed to with the property owner. This is where the new location of Boston Lawnmower is. And the agreement for the site plan review was that they provide an easement to the town to anticipate the potential need for a future sidewalk along Oak Street. So this was a condition of the planning board decision, and it just needs town meeting approval for the select board to enter into an agreement for the easement.
Question?
McMahon, excuse me. I move to recommend the town vote to authorize the select board to acquire by gift. Do we want to make this by gift only? We've had this issue before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Instead of going through the,
The acceptance of the easement at 2 Bridle Lane for the sidewalk.
Bradley, second.
Yep. Right.
Ahuja, yes.
Lumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brant, yes.
Shimada, yes.
clap, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Shafford, yes.
That's 900. Thank you very much, Jenny, for your time.
Thank you.
I will move on to our next thing. Okay, a couple items to catch you up on. We had the finance team meeting this morning, and I got a couple other phone calls today. So first off, when we last left our plans for when there'll be the select board meeting to talk about the budget, it was going to be tomorrow night, but unfortunately there was a problem with the posting of it. So instead, the select board meeting is being moved to Thursday at 4 p.m. so they can still give us a recommendation ahead of our 7 o'clock Thursday night meeting and go through that. And so that's also when I
Does that mean we
believe,
have to start at 9?
no, I've been told that they
Midnight.
do have an executive session potentially, but they could go to another room for that, supposedly. You never know, but we'll be here waiting and we're looking impatient, right? And that means also when we talked about being able to listen again to petition warrant articles that we have not heard from yet, that would be at that time. So we probably won't vote them that night so we could watch them on Westborough TV and vote them the next week or something. Okay, so that's part A. Part B, or unrelated. As part of the ongoing audit of the town's numbers, a mistake was found in which means we have more free cash than we thought and less enterprise funds, less in some of the enterprise funds than we had. And Christy will be able to speak to that Thursday, but generally speaking, one of our temporary accountants classified something that was a borrow as a free cash article instead. So there's 2.6 million more in free cash, and the various enterprises, water, sewer, and country club have less in them, but enough to still do whatever they were going to do. So that's a change, but it doesn't shut us down. If you remember, right before the fall town meeting, we were trying to get the free cash certified. Otherwise, we couldn't have used free cash at the fall town meeting. And I think there were, anyway, so that was an incorrect thing done. Other thing is, I sent around the comments, the start of the comments on the various articles. Rod has provided me some good comments on the ones he objected to. I'm looking for input from Ahuja or Beth on Prashant or Beth, sorry, on the community preservation, because I couldn't think of a reason of why of you voted against, but you must have had some reason. So if that's possible, send me that. And also continue to review those. I will update what we have now and send it out, and that'll have Rod's new comments in it as well, so we can look at that. I have started a swath at the message starting off, but it's really hard to do until you know the numbers in general, because we don't know where they're going to end up yet. But I'm trying to do all the parts that I can do. And so I might send some of that out ahead of time, but if not, in my mind, that's going to be the primary focus of our last week, would be working through that and all, the R&R book. According to me, we don't have very many articles that we have not voted yet outside the citizen petitions. There's prior year bills, which we don't know if we're going to get. There's obviously the budget, which we should start on Thursday anyway. The superintendent will be here on Thursday and can speak to Article 11L, which we haven't voted yet, which is the plumbing repairs thing. Rod, you did get information on the HVAC rooftop unit.
Yep.
You want to wait till Thursday to
Please.
digest that?
Yep.
We don't have a number yet on Article 18, so we'll wait on that and we'll see where that goes. But other than that, we voted everything except for the CPs. Okay. Anybody have anything else we need to discuss? It's after 9, so I think we could.
Shafford, motion to adjourn.
Thank
Brandt,
you.
second.
Shafford and Brandt. Hassan,
Ahuja, yes.
thank you.
Lumber, yes.
Bradley, yes?
Brandt, yes.
Clap, yes.
Leslie, yes.
Shafford, yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you, Westborough TV. At 9:02.